On this day in history, September 15th, 1440, Gilles de Rais, one of the earliest known serial killers, is taken into custody upon an accusation brought against him by Jean de Malestroit, Bishop of Nantes. Included in the following is an excerpt from the 1944 edition of the Encyclopaedia Britannica, going over the history of the Marshal. Gilles de Rais, or Retz, born 1404, died 1440, Marshal of France, the central figure of the 15th century cause célèbre, was the son of Guy de Montmorency Laval, the adopted son and heir of Jean de Rais, and of Marie de Cron. He was born at Machical in September or October 1404, and was brought up by his grandfather, Jean de Cron. Chief among his great possessions was the barony of Rais, erected in the 16th century into the peerage duchy of Retz, south of the Loire, on the marches of Brittany. He joined the Montforts, supporting Jean V of Brittany against the house of Penthievre. He helped to release Duke John from Oliver de Blois, Count of Penthievre, and was rewarded by extensive grants of land, subsequently commuted by the Breton Parliament for money payments. In 1420 he married Catherine of Thouars, a great heiress of Brittany, La Vendée and Poitou. In 1426 he raised 7 companies of men-at-arms and began active warfare against the English under Arthur de Richemont. He accompanied Joan of Arc to Orleans, fighting by her side at Orleans and afterwards at Jacques and Patay. He had advocated further measures against the English on the Loire before carrying out the coronation of Charles VII at Rheims. On July 17th he was made Marshal of France at Rheims. In the winter he was in Normandy at Louviers, whether with a view to the release of Joan, then a prisoner at Rouen, cannot be stated. He expended great sums in the king's service and maintained a court more suited to royal than baronial rank. He was a munificent patron of literature and music, and his library contained many valuable works, he himself being a skilled illuminator and binder. At the chief festivals he gave performances of mysteries and moralities, and it has been asserted that the Mystère de la Passion, acted at Angers in 1420, was staged by him in honor of his own marriage. The original draft of The Mystery of Orleans was probably written under his direction. In his financial difficulties he began to alienate his lands, selling his estates for small sums, providing his heirs with material for many lawsuits. Among those who profited by his prodigality were the Duke of Brittany and his chancellor, Jean de Malestroit, Bishop of Nantes. But in 1436 his kinsfolk appealed to Charles VII, who proclaimed further sales to be illegal. Jean V refused to acknowledge the king's right to promulgate a decree of this kind in Brittany, and replied by making Gilles de Rais lieutenant of Brittany and by acknowledging him as his brother-in-arms. Gilles hoped to redeem his fortunes by alchemy, and also spent large sums on necromancers, seeking to guarantee himself from evil consequences by extravagant charity and a splendid celebration of the rites of the church. The abominable practices of which he was really guilty seem to have escaped the notice of his equals or superiors, though suspected by the peasantry. His wife left him in 1434-35, and when his brother René de la Suze seized Champtoche, family considerations no doubt imposed silence. His servants kidnapped children, generally boys, who he tortured and murdered. The number of his victims was stated in the ecclesiastical trial to have been 140. In 1440 he came into conflict with the church by an act of violence which involved sacrilege and infringement on clerical immunity, and in the autumn he was arrested and cited before the Bishop of Nantes on various charges, the chief of which were heresy and murder. With the latter count the ecclesiastical church was incompetent to deal, and Gilles refused to accept its jurisdiction, October 8th. Terrified by excommunication, however, he secured absolution by confession. A parallel inquiry was made by Pierre de l'Hopital, president of the Breton Parliament, by whose sentence he was hanged, not burned alive as it's sometimes stated, on October 26, 1440, with 2 of his accomplices. In view of his confessions, his guilt seems certain, but the irregularities of the proceedings, the fact that his chief accomplices went unpunished, taken together with the financial interest of Jean V in his ruin, have left a certain mystery over the trial. With the exception of the process of Joan of Arc, was the most famous in 15th century France. His name is connected with the tale of Bluebeard in local tradition at Machical, Tifol, Pornic, and Chimère. The records of the trial are preserved in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, at Nantes, and elsewhere.